Well, good evening, Susie. Are you there? Hi, Susie. Well, we're all here and assembled, and I think it's probably about 20 seconds to 7. So if you could just let us know when the live stream has started, I will start the meeting. Excellent. Well, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Vale of Whitehorse Oxfordshire District Council's Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Max Thompson and I'll be chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely if they wish through Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being streamed live and recorded on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. I have 2 procedural matters. So firstly, if councillors wish to ask a question or participate in the debate, please raise your hand and I'll call on you in turn. And then as a modern council, both officers and members will be using their electronic devices throughout the meeting. I have 4 housekeeping announcements. The first is evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to your right, and stand at assembly point 9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. The Democratic Services Officer present will assist you. On arriving at the meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed the fire register. Please inform Democratic Services if you have not done so. Number 2, mobile phones, please off or silent. Number 3, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the applications they're interested in have been debated, you're very welcome to do so, but please do so via the front door reception and quietly without interacting with committee in their deliberations. And agenda item 4, when the meeting is ended, I'll ask for confirmation the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. And as the final point, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public attending in person ensure they do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberations outside of those who've registered to speak in their allocated slots. Great. So I now move on to agenda item 2. Apologies for absence. Lucy, have we got any apologies this evening?
Thank you, Chair. There's no apology for absence. We have Councillor Sarah James attending as a substitute member for the vacancy.
Great, thank you. And would you mind just taking a quick roll call?
Of course. Councillor Max Thompson.
Yes, sir.
Councillor Val Shaw.
Present.
Councillor Ron Batstone.
Present.
Councillor Jenny Hannaby.
Present.
Councillor Scott Horton.
Present.
Councillor Robert Madison.
Present.
Councillor Mike Piggles.
Present.
Councillor Jill Rayner.
Present.
And Councillor Sarah James.
Present.
Thank you so much. I now turn to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of February 2026. Do I have any comments or can I have a motion to accept those as a correct record? Councillor Watson.
Propose to accept them as correct record.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor James, thank you very much. So all those in favour? Those against?
I wasn't there.
Any abstentions?
Abstentions.
Well, that's not quite unanimous, but it's unanimous for those who went. Very good. I will sign those at the end of the meeting. Agenda item 4 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? Councillor Batson.
Yes, I will be standing down for item 8 because it's in my ward and I will be speaking on it as well.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Right, I think that's it. So agenda item 5, urgent business. Natasha, have we got the urgent business?
Urgent business. Evening.
Okay, very good. And finally, public participation. We have a number of registered speakers on the 2 applications, and I will give you instructions as and when we call upon you. Yes, all very good. So with that, I turn to the first of the 2 items we're considering this evening. The first is NPK Access Solutions UK. Is Thrupp Lane Radley, and Catherine, I believe you're presenting on this one. Very good, thank you.
The first application to be considered is a 6-year temporary application for use of the site by a road contractor business. The site relates to part of Curtis Yard off Thrupp Lane in Radley. The application follows a temporary period for the same use running from 2016 to 2021 but the business has continued to operate on the site since the end of the temporary permission. Before moving into the application, I just wanted to highlight 2 additional representations that have been made since the report was published. Number 1, the comments are summarised. While the report states there were no accidents or no recorded accidents, it is reported that in 2016, an individual fell into the road while 2 lorries were passing each other and consequently required hospital treatment. And the second comment, the second representation strongly requests that a restriction is placed on any permission requiring the use to end if the mineral permission is no longer in effect, which essentially means if the ROMP application determines the use is no longer in effect, they have asked that this temporary permission also ceases. It also raises concerns over the flood risk and the transport information which was submitted with the application. Both these representations have been registered publicly under the application. The site is accessed off Thrupp Lane with office buildings and staff parking to the east. Just highlight that on the plan. A central area is used for parking and turning of large vehicles, and there's a separate access on the southern edge. A repair workshop is used by the business, and this faces onto the yard. The area to the west of the site is used as storage for road matting. The mats are washed down on the site. HDVs move the matting on and off the site, but wherever possible, the mats are transferred between construction sites and not brought back to the base. The next few slides show that quite well. You can see that the matting being stored on the site. This shows that the southern access where HDVs come in and out. It's an illustrative picture of mattings being stored onto the large vehicles. The operation involves no more than 6 to 8 commercial vehicles per day, but typically to access the site. This gives you an idea of the working yard area and the types of vehicles that use the site, also showing that there's a large area kept open to allow vehicles to manoeuvre around the site. Here you can see the repair workshop. And then on the right is the staff car parking area and some of the offices. The next slide shows the site in the context of the surrounding gravel works and other commercial uses and nearby dwellings. On the left side, I've marked the nearest residential properties with the yellow mark. And here you can see the application site marked in red. The pink line shows Thrupp Lane, so where vehicle traffic relating to the application site will come in and out. But this road is also used by other commercial businesses and the gravel works surrounding the application sites. Just want to touch on the wider site. So looking at the right hand you can see Tuckwell's yard. There's a concrete batching plant which has permanent planning permission, also for the processing of sand and gravel. Marked here. So in relation to the application site, part of Curtis Yard is here. There's also Tarmac Limited, which is located to the south of the application site, this sort of greeny blue colour. This is a concrete batching plant that has a certificate of lawfulness to continue operating. Curtis Yard, so that's what we're looking at today. It had a temporary permission issued to Terra Firma as a personal permission, and that was for the use of several buildings land on Curtis Yard in 2016. The use covered buildings and office, the workshop and the yard for the contractor. It ran until 2021 and has expired. Then on the very far left of Curtis Yard, sort of beyond the line area, there was also a 5-year temporary permission for office use, and that ran until the end of 2025. With the exception of Curtis Yard and the tarmac plants, the wider areas associated with the gravel pits have either been restored to lakes or ponds, or have naturally regenerated to grassland, woodland or shrub. scrub. Coming back to the application itself, it's important that it is considered on its own merits and having regard to the proposed site and use only. It is acknowledged that there are other uses relating to the gravel works and other commercial uses in the immediate area. And this also takes into account HGVs from other sites travelling along Thrupp Lane. However, the impact from the movements of HGVs specifically relating to the proposal site is relatively low, a low impact, and largely comparable to the 2016 application. The business and the level of activity is the same. At that time, it was considered appropriate to secure the level of activity and manage traffic movements for personal permission. This is the same in this case. The temporary permission would be tied to the applicant's MPK. There are no objections to the proposal on technical grounds. The assessment of highways, green belts, impact on amenity, and the history of the sites, as well as the wider sites, are covered in detail in the report. The temporary permission for 6 years does not conflict with the end date for the wider gravel works and would continue to meet the restoration timescales. For this reason, officers recommend approval of the temporary permission. I pass back to the Chair to consider the application in more detail, and I'm available to answer questions on the proposal.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I will return to you for some questions once we've heard from our two speakers on this application. So our first speaker is Chris Henderson, Representative Bradley Parish Council. Senator, thank you for joining us. Please, if you can take your seat. Thank you so much. So you'll have 3 minutes to speak when you're ready, and you'll get a 30-second warning, and then there might be some questions of clarification for you from the committee afterwards. So thank you for joining us, please.
Bradley Parish Council object to this application. The site is in the Greenbelt and is long overdue for restoration. Gravel extraction ceased on the site in 1979. Since then, there have been a series of temporary permissions granted with the excuse that the site might at some future point be used for processing gravel from the area south of the old railway line. This excuse is no longer viable, as the current review of old minerals permissions, ROMP application, makes it clear that processing would take place in Tuckwell's Yard. If the ROMP application is granted, one of the conditions is that the timetable for restoration of the part of the site covered by this application should be agreed at the latest by 2 years from the start of extraction to the south, as referenced in paragraph 1.11 of the officer's report. Though the Parish Council are pushing for a fixed deadline of June 2028. If the ROMP is refused, then restoration should commence immediately in line with the Commission conditions on the original Minerals Commission. The County Council Minerals response seems to have been provided by someone who has little knowledge of the current ROMP process. The date of 2042, which relates to the expiry of the Minerals Commissions on the larger site, is irrelevant to considerations of this proposal. The applicant's previous permission expired in 2021. The Vale have been unwilling, despite us prompting them, to enforce against their continued operation without planning permission, and NPK have probably only finally applied with a view to the impending ROMP decision. Given their record, if they granted permission until 2032, we fully expect them to still be on site in at least 2036, given the lack of likelihood of enforcement. It is impossible to argue that this will not seriously delay any restoration agreed as part of the ROMP process. Regarding the traffic impact, while it's true that the applicant provides fewer HGV movements than the gravel businesses, they do add to the cumulative problem on the failed road that is supposed to be part of National Cycleway C5. Though cyclists who have used Thrupp Lane once are usually too frightened by near misses to try again. Despite claims by County Highways, there have been numerous accidents on Thrupp Lane.
30 seconds left.
We can provide photographic evidence of lorries lying on their side in the field. Also in 2016, while walking on the lane, the current chair of our parish council was forced off the road by 2 lorries trying to pass and suffered a broken collarbone. If the council feels obliged to grant permission, then we would accept 6 years from the expiry of their previous permission, which would take them to November 27. by which time the romp will have been decided, and it will be much clearer as to when restoration will actually take place on this site.
Thank you very much. There may be some questions of clarification for you. So are there any questions? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned if there was further gravel extraction to the south of the old railway line, then it wouldn't take place, and the wood processing wouldn't take place on this site. It would take place at another one. So I'm not super familiar with the name. So can you pull the map up?
You can put the map up. I can show you.
Yeah, I'm just not familiar with the names of every section of the.
Yeah, sorry. It's a very complicated process with lots of overlapping permissions, largely where people have played off the Vale against the county. So basically we've got Tuckwell's Yard. So this is the area that is being considered for extraction, and there will be a Bailey Bridge across there to going into Tuckwell's Yard for processing of the gravel from that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Are there any further questions?
I'll do it of officers, sorry.
Okay, right, okay. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I know now
we
turn
need
to
the
our
mapper?
second. What?
Can we leave the mapper?
I'm happy for the map to be left up.
Yeah,
But
if you wouldn't mind.
I now turn to
Forever
our
after
second
it's
speaker, Mr. Henry Willis, who's speaking in support of the action. So thank you for joining us. As with everyone else, 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I'm speaking on behalf of NPK, who are the operators of the site. They're not the owners of the site, which is J. Curtis and Sons, and they've been the owners since the 1960s. I think the previous speaker may have been slightly unfair in describing my client as being somebody for playing off one council against another. That's really not the case. We did make an application when the previous permission expired, but unfortunately there was an administrative problem that meant that the application didn't get decided, and it was treated as withdrawn rather than approved or refused or actually withdrawn. And we had a process of negotiation with the county council, who have provided us with the dates. We haven't made these dates up. The county council have provided us with the dates. That the end date is 2042. Working back from that, we established that a further temporary period of time to go to 2032, so giving a good 10 years in which the restoration could all take place, would be suitable. That would give my client's company surety of employment. They started just outside Steventon and moved to this site in 2017. There are 12 jobs which are vital to operate from this site because it's the headquarters for the operation. They very much do limit the amount of traffic which comes in and out of the site. As much as possible, they'll send lorries out of the site with men that stay overnight in the wagons when they're moving around the equipment, or can go or leave it on site. So they only bring equipment into the site when they need to repair the wagons or some of the broken equipment. By far away, the largest traffic user of the site are the 2 concrete yards. And the accident which was referred to by the previous speaker in 2016 was prior to my client coming to the site, of course, because they didn't start until 2017. Highways have reviewed the use, and they are comfortable that the use is safe and acceptable. The office workers can walk and cycle to the site because it's very handy. It doesn't represent inappropriate development in the greenbelt for the reasons expressed in the officer's report, and there are no other technical objections to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There may be some questions of clarification for you, so I'll ask if there are any questions. Councillor Pickles.
Can I just ask a question about the current levels of business on the site? The report clearly states there's a relatively low number of traffic movements. Is that likely to be the case in 6 years' time, for example, at the end of this contract? Is the business likely to stay at that kind of level?
Yes, it's been broadly consistent over the last number of years. I spoke to the operator of the site before coming this evening to ask a very similar question to that, and he said, as far as we can see, there's no reason that the business would grow and become a different thing. They're well established. The way they work would carry on in the same way. But I hope you're all clear from the officer's explanation as actually what it is they do on site. In that they do temporary road mattings that are used on construction sites all over the southeast and the Midlands. and it's only occasionally that they have to come back to be repaired, or the vehicles that move them around to be repaired. This is kind of a hub, but very often the road mattings can just be moved from one site to another. That's worked for the last 20 years as their operation, so they know it very well.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, before we're going to ask the officer, but I think you mentioned it. The 6-year application is from your client. That's they're asking for 6 years. It's not that. I was trying to find out where the 6-year number came from.
Well, it was a work backwards number from 2042 to give a good 10 years period, which felt very generous to be able to do the reinstatement works to put it back to nature. And that felt to be a convenient period that allowed our client long enough that they could carry on employing people on the site rather than having to find new premises.
I think what I'm getting is your client was the one who they worked out the 6 years and are asking for 6 years.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. That was the question I was trying to.
Yes, Councillor James.
Thank you. Can I just ask, so you've made it clear that this is very important to the business as a hub, but it's only for 6 years, so this is only a temporary solution for the business. What is their sort of longer term plan? And clearly a sort of stable business, I presume, plans to exist well after that.
Yes. Well, that's rather forced by the county council saying that the site needs to be returned to nature. So that's kind of outside of my client's hands. As I say, they're only an occupier, so they have 5-year leases to go from sort of 5-year periods. And where we are is slightly awkward in terms of the way the leases have started. At the end of that period, they know that there's a fixed end date, so they will prepare a long time in advance of that to leave the site. They have, in the time they've been here, set up a new premises in Scotland. And they're operating from Scotland, so they don't have to move things that far because it's too far to do that. They would have to find somewhere else.
Answer any further questions. Also, thank you very much for your time this evening. And now we'll go to any questions we have of our officer. Does anyone have any questions for Catherine before we move into debate?
There's a difference of opinion clearly between the parish council and what the gentleman representing. And PK said, could you just clarify about what the actual return to nature date is and how the 6 years stands up against that in terms of the 10-year period to regenerate the site?
So this is defined by this ROMP application that's managed by OCC, will be determined by the Secretary of State, but it's still under consideration. And that the end of the gravel works has to be 2042. Built into that is a whole series of conditions, and the conditions are being reviewed at the moment. And one of those conditions specifically relates to Purchase Yard, the restoration programme. And I just need to find the exact wording, but it specifies that I think in advance of any future mineral working, so the southern end of the site, there's a date that plans for restoration have to be submitted, and then within that condition, the time frame has to be set out for when it has to be restored. So by making use of the 2042 date, bringing it forward by 10 years to 2032, that gives a full 10-year period to comply with that condition, to put in the details of what would be required, when the timescales would happen. So that feels a very reasonable approach. It fits with discussions that district, county, enforcement officers have had in terms of 6 years seems a sensible period to allow the business to work, but not to conflict with any of those timescales, and to allow the ROMP application to be determined and to have a very clear idea at that point of what the timescales would be.
You partially answered my second question, which was, have all the stakeholders in this signed off the effectively the 6-year kind of temporary extension to the plan?
Well, it's been determined by the district council, but discussions did happen in advance of that.
It would be the county council, for example, and the
OCC has been
involved today. There must be all kinds of people involved.
OCC have been involved in those discussions. District enforcement officers, district council. So yeah, that work has happened before the application was submitted. So the officers are happy with a 6-year period.
I think Councillor Hannaby.
Yeah, that's right. Brook Lane, when I first became a district councillor many moons ago, I think Brook Lane was talked about quite regularly, various things. But it always seemed to me that it's quite a good area for what is going on in here, because you've got them sort of all together. So what is the actual year now that everyone's got a scarp and we have to have all this romp when it's sorted?
So the gravel workings managed by the ROMP have to finish 2042, but within that there are conditions, sort of like leading conditions for when the restoration scheme has to be submitted, and then actually the work carried out based on what comes in.
So it could go on further than 42.
No, that's
I'm just trying to get the
there's just to clarify, that's determined by the ROMP application.
So this business carrying on here is not making too much difference to the whole movement of that area. Fine.
No, it doesn't.
I've read this here, and OCC is okay.
The application itself has been assessed from technical perspective. It sits alongside the ROMP conditions and timescales, and there's no conflict there. But the actual wider sites and those other uses are managed by the ROMP. So this has to be dealt with.
Yes, it's own right. I do remember the discussions.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that, so this application is talking about 6 years from the application, from until February 26. Will this also cover the retrospective period where between the expiry of the previous temporary permission and now?
It doesn't, but it doesn't really need to. We're just looking forward for that.
That's I just wanted to, because I was a bit concerned whether it's retrospective or current or how it's all working.
Catherine, I have a question on this, which is to do with beyond the 2032 period. So I understand that I understand what you said about 2042. So we've heard concerns from the parish council about, well, after 6 years, there is concern that it will continue to be used in this way. Just so I'm clear, what enforcement measures do we have to either prevent that happening, or would that require another application to come in if the applicant wished to use the site for longer than 2032 period?
Yeah, it would need a new permission. I think we'd strongly be looking at another temporary permission, but also within the background, we'd have greater certainty on the ROMP application, which fixes more specifically the timescales. So that would be a material consideration in terms of what length of time is appropriate or whether continued use is appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the cycle route and the impact on the cycle route, because I am a cyclist who has been on it more than once, and in fact used to use it weekly, commute to Oxford, and I think that there's a major problem with heavy traffic on that cycle route from the point of view of the cyclist. It's really very daunting, very scary. There's no space, and it's incredibly dusty and muddy, that route in hot, dry weather. And that is something that really has changed hugely since this originally had temporary permission, is the establishment and the sort of pickup of people using that route. And also the whole focus of the county and the transport plans for the county and the policies of this council towards actually encouraging active travel, getting people to be able to take their commute from Abingdon to Oxford by bike and things like that, is, that's completely shifted during this timescale. And this doesn't seem to sort of acknowledge that at all or pay any attention to that. I mean, I understand they're only part of the traffic on Brook Lane, but to be giving permission for really heavy vehicles like HGVs with trailers to be continuing on Brook Lane when we could say no, seems to me quite an odd decision, really, in the context that we now have, with that being such an important act of travel in.
I do understand what you're saying, but I think what would have, if that was going to be a reason for refusal, it would have to be really clear that it's the size of the vehicles, the number of vehicle movements that are having a direct impact on truck lane and on the safety of the lane. That hasn't been raised as an objection, highways objection or highway safety objection by the highways officer. And his comments were that it doesn't sort of intensify or significantly intensify the use of the truck lane. And it's clear in national policy that we have to have severe highway harm to be able to push back on that. So I would be nervous if that was put forward for a reason of refusal directly related to this temporary use. But
Right.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor, you've got a follow-up question, please.
No, it's a different question. So
I don't really mind.
Mine's related to your question.
There you go.
So, on reading the report, I mean, one of the things that's heavily influenced your decision to approve this is the fact that the traffic levels are said to not materially be greater than they are currently. So, what enforcement mechanism will be in place that can monitor and verify that it's not going to increase? So, therefore, the basis for this approval is sound.
And that's one of the reasons we put the temporary commission on, so that the personal condition to fix it to that particular business. We've seen sort of over the original 5-year temporary permission that it's fixed to that business, and that was effective to manage the sort of transport movements, the level of activity.
But what would happen? I mean, I'm absolutely certain the guy from MPK was being accurately said there's no plans to expand the business. But say the number of traffic movements doubled in a year's time. Given the whole basis for approval for this in the green belt, this temporary extension is the fact that traffic movements are not materially going to increase. And I agree with Councillor James. I do cycle on that route at least 2 or 3 times a week. And the terra firma vehicles, one of the issues with them is they're not like the Tuckwell ones, which are medium to short wheelbase vehicles. These have trailers on the back as well, so they're double length vehicles. They're not small vehicles by any means. So my reason I'm asking this question, I'm worried is what happens if things change and what enforcement mechanism is in place, given your decision is quite heavily being based on the fact that there's going to be no material increase in traffic to support the personal approval you get into MPK.
I think partly it's the available space on site. That's
It looked like there's lots of space actually.
And it's turning round space.
Yeah,
So
you've got the storage space on the sort of western edge, and there's no further space to expand out, or it's fairly clear where the storage space is. Within the middle, that has to stay open so that you can manoeuvre the HGV vehicles. The office buildings are sort of fairly compact in the eastern edge of the sites. So yeah, I mean, any expansion there would have to come back to planning to consider anyway.
Why? Why would it have to come back to planning?
Because it'd be new, if it was new office buildings expansion. That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
There's only 12 people, so I don't want to be argumentative. So sorry.
We can be argumentative in debate. So,
but that doesn't quite make sense.
Okay, but for now, questions. Councillor James, you're next.
Oh, thank you. So unrelated really I was going to ask about the weight given to the green belt, because it doesn't seem very strong here, and also sort of the impact on landscape, and particularly noting that one of the comments that I think possibly came in quite late sort of showed sort of satellite imagery that looked like a lot of the trees and the sort of greenery around it, there is quite a bit less now than there was in temporary permission originally granted. So it may be that it has a greater impact, sort of as viewed from I've forgotten which property was, and sort of immediately north of Wick Hall, and all that sort of drive area and things like that, and the footpath that sort of cuts across there.
Yeah, I can pick up on sort of both those points.
Yeah.
Firstly, the sort of green belt is purely looking at sort of openness. So just sort of setting aside any sort of planting, hedging, landscaping works. So the green belt, it's existing buildings, it's existing hard standing. There's no new buildings that could sort of extend in and or out into the openness of the green belt. So in terms of the operational work, there's no greater harm or no change to impact on the green belt. The use itself is pretty much comparable to the previous temporary use. And the use itself, we felt there was no harm to openness. And then sort of separate to that, there may be landscaping that's been lost. There's no sort of designation or protection for that particular landscaping or those trees. So it's not something we could manage or restrict or prevent happening. Yeah, I think that's the conclusion really.
Councillor Hannan.
Yeah, as I say, I know this lane and I can't count the discussions, let's put it that, over the period of years. I don't think that ever anybody has done that part cycle as for a cycleway. And it's always been a bit of an issue because of the heavy traffic use on there. So if you ride your bike on an area that's is going to have these heavy traffic movements and the path isn't made up to a you're going to get that, aren't you? Because it's almost like an industrial estate off of the pathway there. So the fact that it's only we've got a 6-year period, and would they'd have to come back if they wanted it in the future. I think that is some safe way, I believe, for.
We're getting dangerously close to
Exactly.
Is there a question at the end of this?
Immediately.
It's all right, it's okay.
All I can say is that has been like it has been for decades.
Thank you. So I have a question, Catherine. So since this application came forward in 2016, Radley has a neighbourhood plan, right? So since 2018, and and again, part of that specifically mentions Thrupp Lane. So I just wondered how much consideration had been given to Radley neighbourhood plan in determining this application.
A good deal. So in the report and the assessment of each of the neighbourhood plan policies. So Radley Lakes is relevant in that it talks about development which directly promotes nature conservation or quiet recreation. Has to comply with this. This is for commercial development, so it's sort of doesn't trigger that policy. Also looked at PP9 in terms of roads. So new development will be supported where it complies with other development plan policies, which this does, and can be satisfactorily accommodated within the existing highways network. Again, that's being considered by the highways officer and meets that requirement on technical grounds. CO11 Thrupp Lane, industrial and commercial sites at the foot of Thrupp Lane should be served by a more suitable new road leading westward, blah, 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 blah. In the wording of that, that's very much an ambition for the wider sites, but this application in isolation doesn't trigger that or require any direct mitigation because of that. Again, there's a policy promoting cycling and walking, but that happens at the moment in terms of workers coming by bike, by cycling, public transport. So having gone through that, it does not conflict with the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you. Have we got any further questions for our officer, or should we go to Councillor Rayner?
It's just really picking up on the landscaping side, really, the nature side. There's a couple of references here that talk about the landscape being protected from harmful development and no CPOs close to the site. However, concerns raised over loss of trees and vegetation. It's talking here about sort of there being no risk and sort of protecting what's there in essence. How can we make sure that that is reasonably done if there's there's nothing stopping the any accidents or width of lorries or whatever else? How does this become possible that you can do that if there are no CPOs or are no sort of designated areas?
So can you be a bit more?
Sorry, I'm making no sense on that.
Just to understand which area you're looking to protect or.
No, I'm just reading the application, reading the comments, and it's saying that, as there's no contribution to nature and quality of district landscape, will be protected from harmful development and where possible enhanced. So it's talking about there's no extra development, but there will be protection of what's there. And I know, following on from sort of Councillor James's comments, and it looks like there is less and less of the greenbelt out there, or looking at the amount of trees and landscape out there. Is there anything that can be done? How I'm trying to work out how you can protect it if there is no protection, because there's no CPOs, there's nothing in there. Do we?
So we have the landscape policy CP44. In this case, because it is entirely sort of hard standing, there isn't really opportunity to provide any meaningful landscape on the sites. There's a separate mechanism to protect trees through TPOs, through protection orders, so tree preservation orders, and there's nothing that's sort of relevant to be protected on the site. So I think it has been looked at, but unfortunately there is no opportunity to sort of provide additional landscape on the site. I think that would itself conflict with the proposed use. And
it wasn't sorry, I'm sorry, what I'm trying to say is that it's not the side, not where the lorries turn up, the rest of it, but where the cyclists are, using the track at Thrupp Lane and where the movement of the lorries is. So not exactly where they end up, but coming and going from there. It just seems to be a little bit of hit and miss. And I know it's worked and it doesn't, it's not a great change from what the applications have been in the past, etc. But I'm just wondering, following on from Councillor James's comments about, making sure that we are encouraging active travel, how we can make sure that areas are protected in some way to encourage that even more. Without, does it need conditions that we can't do?
I think it's a much wider project for that area. So it sits outside this application. In the long term, that may be possible to come through the wider restoration, and there's timescales to achieve that. But it's very much a separate project to this, so that could be achieved or secured or justified.
So I think the key thing just to get my head around this is that this site itself does not include the Thrupp Lane. Like Thrupp Lane is not the ownership of. Is that right? So
yeah,
it's beyond this. So anything to do with like cycling or cycleways and that, just so I'm clear on this, it isn't covered by this application.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Is that fair? Because I don't want to say it's.
Thrupp Lane has to be considered because that's where the traffic will go along or reach the site. So you can consider the amount of traffic, the size of the vehicles, and whether it's got safe access without impacting public safety. We've had advice that is the case, but it's also got to be taken into account that this isn't the only business using Thrupp Lane. There are a number of others that rely on that to reach the concrete processing plants, etc.
Understood. Councillor James.
Was there an opportunity? Could we have asked Active Travel England to comment on this, given that it is a national cycle network? And I know Councillor Hannaby said, this has always been an industrial estate. For 25 years, a quarter of a century now, it's been national cycle network along Thrupp Lane. So you know, it's time to start considering it, really.
Shall I come in? Exactly. There's a threshold at which we're triggered to, we're required to consult, and it's significantly below that threshold. It's pretty,
Right.
I can pick up, but
So it's not triggered by being
it's
national.
not triggered
social
by
network.
that. No.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I'm going to suggest we move into debate on this application. So to do so, I need a motion. So would someone like to put a motion on this application? Councillor Handy.
Yes, thank you. I've listened to the discussion so far. I've listened to everybody, and I believe that I'd like to recommend that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions laid out in 1, 2, and 3, and also what we've heard from the officers today.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Horton. Okay, so we have a motion to accept the officer's recommendation to permit. I open the floor to debate.
So may I kick off?
Please.
Well, as I say, I have known this this area and all the activity, commercial. It's a commercial area that's been used for many years. And what we're looking at here is permission for 6 years. The officers have looked at it, and the county council has no issues with it. The district council hasn't got any issues other than the conditions laid out. So I believe that we should be supporting. It does give employment, and as we've heard, there will be limited vehicles on this area due to the size of the area.
Thank you. Is there any further debate? Councillor James.
So I will not be supporting this motion. I do disagree. I consider it to be overdevelopment really in this area, and particularly because it is a temporary application and following from another temporary application. You know, there's not some establishment that this is a sort of industrial employment site in perpetuity. It is in fact very much in the process of being restored to nature. You know, I mean, it's immediately next to Radley Lakes, which has been, you know, for a long time now a sort of a public sort of nature space, and for a quarter of a century it's been on a national cycle network, which is increasingly important and increasingly well used, and so I consider it overdevelopment in this location really to be granting a permission for all the 6 years for this site.
Councillor Pickles.
So I kind of sympathise with Councillor James's view. However, I think the reality is, if you look at this from a planning perspective and look at the application in front of us, it's a continuous of an existing business with existing business activity. And you know, whilst I agree that there's a bigger problem with truck lane and the cycleway which needs to be addressed, I don't think objecting to this planning permission actually does it. However, when you kind of look at, I mean, this is continuation of a planning permission within the green belt, and it feels to be like drift, if you like. You know, it's kind of drifting to kind of an end date, which is probably, so whilst all the stakeholders, as the officers confirmed, have been involved, it's not necessarily set in stone, and I do worry this kind of just drifts on forever. However, I don't think these are reasons to object to it. However, I would say that one of the material considerations that was given to this application by the officers, including highways particularly, was that there'd be no material increase in traffic movements. Now, it is a very large site. I did bother to go down there and have a look. The office, there are 12 people employed on the site. The offices could obviously accommodate a lot more people if you look at the scale of them, and actually there's a lot of empty space in that yard. So whilst I completely believe the gentleman from MPK when he says that there's no plans to expand the business, that does slightly worry me. So for me to support approval of this, I would like to see a condition on monitoring of the, when I was thinking about this, can there be permission around HGV movements, effectively capping them at the numbers that the operators already said it's going to be limited to anyway, recorded, because otherwise the basis for saying the impact is not materially greater is not realistically enforceable unless you have some form of condition in there. So therefore, my logic is that if you bother to analyse the fact that traffic isn't going to increase, and that's the basis for approval largely, in the absence of any other technical consideration, and this is a continuation, therefore we must make it enforceable if we believe that it's one of the bases for, I'm just quoting the officer actually in the report, is what, so I would recommend some form of condition on capping HGV movements and some method of monitoring them.
I think I'll ask officers if such condition, I think I should ask officers if such condition is something that could be realistically enforced or set out, and then I'll ask the movers of the motion whether, once we found out whether such condition is something that we could frame and monitor, I'll ask if it's a friendly amendment or not. So I'd be curious if the officers could maybe comment on what Councillor Pickles has put forward.
My initial reaction is, in terms of enforcing it, you would have to have somebody there pretty much sort of counting vehicles in and out. So it does seem quite onerous to do that.
Is there some form of like self-monitoring? Like, is there some form of like reporting back to? Again, I'm trying to get my head around whether it is something that is reasonable and practical and specific enough. Because I'm quite a sympathetic person, as what Councillor Pickles is saying. We're being asked to approve this on the basis of no material increase. It would be nice if there was a way of ensuring there was a material increase.
Yeah,
but
I consider the logic in doing that, but I can't see a reasonable condition that we have in order to actually make it happen. Even in the instance that 1 week you have 10 vehicles and another week you have 2 vehicles,
So it sounds like such a condition, though it might be desirable, and I'm quite sympathetic to that myself. Before asking whether we will accept it as a friendly, I assume the movers of the motion are not going to accept this as a friendly
I don't think so. I don't think it's with the fact that you've got other contractors around there, and they're not being asked to do things, and they've got more traffic movement, obviously. But as I say, it's a period of 6 years. The county are happy with it, and for the county to be happy with it, and highways, that really is a good guide. I think that they're not too.
So we'll be approving this on the basis of something that's unenforceable. Okay, that's fine.
Well, I just want to get
what do you do with all the other that we've got already on the site? Is there any enforcement on that one? I'm trying to understand why we're doing this.
Because if you read the officer's report, part of the basis for approval is there's going to be no material increase in traffic movements. So my simple question is, it's one of the reasons.
The way we got to that point was it was acknowledged that if a new company came on, that would open the doors to completely different way of working, and that could have material change in low impact types of vehicles. The reason that the personal permission was put on was to try and tie it as closely to possible to this current level of activity and the vehicles. That was consistent with the previous temporary permission, and that felt to be a more enforceable condition that we could manage that level of activity, whereas making it too restrictive in terms of the HDVs. Now, I see what you want to try and achieve with that. I don't think that's enforceable.
Okay, so can I open up a bit more debate on this application? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Chair. I think I largely agree with Councillor Hanbury, hence why I seconded the motion. It's, in my view, not excessive development in the green belt in the basis that it's not really development, it's maintaining what's already there. Regarding the cycling, I agree it's not. And I used to work on the science park just adjacent, so I used to cycle down that way so frequently. And I was honestly always far more put off by the state of the track along the southern side of the lake than I was by Thrupp Lane itself. I never personally had any issues with traffic along there, other than you occasionally have to stop to let a lorry by, but that was fine. That particularly in wet weather, the state of the track further along was far more a problem for the cycling. So basically on those grounds, I see no reason not to support this motion.
Any further comments on this before we vote? Well, if there are no more, I'll suggest that we vote on this motion. So we have a motion to accept the office recommendation to approve for a period of 6 years. So those in favour? Those against? Okay, that passes 7-2, I think. Okay, thank you very much. I now move on to the next item on the agenda this evening, which is, how do we get the wording right? Bradfield Grove Farm on Cow Lane. And thank you, Councillor Buxton, for standing down. Excellent, thank you very much. And Nat, I believe you're presenting this one.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is referred to Planning Committee at the request of the local member. The application proposes a temporary use of land at Bradfield Grove Farm as a base for contractors installing water meters in the local area. The location.
No, we've got the
somehow I'm making this. Yeah, so the location plan shows the site to the west of so the site to the west of the existing agricultural buildings of Bradfield Grove Farm. It's a long access road to the A338. A Thames water sewage treatment plant is to the south, and the access road passes close to several dwellings. The access road crosses a public bridleway, and from the bridleway, the road carries a public footpath, which continues to the north beyond the site to West Hanning. The access road and the dwellings which are close to it are within the parish of Grove, whereas the hard standing itself is within West Hanning. The block plan shows the area of land which will be used for the contractor base, with the remainder of the hard standing remaining in agricultural use. Movable structures will be placed on the land during the use, including a welfare room, an office, materials and a skip. So this is a photo of the site as it was towards the beginning of this year, and it's currently laid to hardcore and this is in conjunction with planning permissions that exist on the land for 2 agricultural buildings with a concrete apron around the buildings. And the agent has confirmed that the vehicles that you can see in these photos are in connection with the construction of that hard standing. So this is looking from the site towards the existing agricultural buildings, and the public footpath runs right to left in this image. And then this is looking to the north towards West Hanning, and the public footpath obviously takes the route. So members are advised that, as outlined in the report, objections have been received from the parish councils and dwellings next to the access road. For the reasons outlined in the report, officers consider that, subject to the recommended conditions that require the use to cease within 2 years and to restrict the permitted hours of the use, development is supportable in principle. It will not cause significant harm to the amenity of neighbouring occupiers, and all other impacts are acceptable. Therefore, you are recommended to approve the application.
Okay, thanks very much. Now we'll turn to some questions what we've heard from our speakers. We have 3 speakers on this application. The first is David Call. Is that, am I pronouncing that correctly? Thank you very much. And a representative of West Henley Parish Council. Thank you so much for joining us. As with everyone else, you have 3 minutes when you're ready, and there might be some questions or clarification for you on that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the application site is actually part of Manor Farm in West Henley, so not Bradfield Farm as described. This site, as we've heard, has 2 extent planning permissions granted on the 3rd of March 2020 for a tractor and implement shed and a hay barn, both with concrete aprons. At the time of the application, the agent for the applicant explained that the farming operations at Manor Farm are being relocated away from West Henley, and the proposed barns are required to maintain the operations of the farm and make it resilient. West Henley Parish Council did not object to these planning applications. Subsequently, West Henley Parish Council objected to the unauthorised parking of white vans on the application site, and they were subsequently moved elsewhere. Although the hard standing and a drainage scheme has been implemented, no work has yet started on the construction of the shed and the hay barn. If permission is granted for the temporary use of the existing hard surfaced area for a contractor's local base to support a commercial use unrelated to farming, this could further delay relocation of the farmstead. The site is in the Lowland Vale. It's a sensitive rural landscape recognised in West Henley Parish Council Neighbourhood Plan and the Vale of Whitehorse District Council Local Plan Core Policy 44 Landscape. This site is highly visible from the public footpath and the restricted byway to the south and west of West Henley across open fields. If planning permission is granted for non-agricultural purposes in this sensitive rural landscape, it would adversely affect the visual amenity of the site and potentially harm the local environment. It would also potentially further delay the relocation of the farmstead away from West Henley that we've been promised over almost 6 years ago. If permission is granted, West Henley Parish Council respectfully request that the use of this site is very clearly specified and that no lighting is used and that the site is adequately screened from views from the north.
30 seconds left.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There might be some questions of clarification for you, so I'll just see. I guess just in terms of adequately screened, what do West Henley Parish Council think that would look like? I mean, is it possible, in your view, to adequately screen it, or what sort of screening would be desired if we were minded to?
I think in the officer's report, he reported that some green material on Harris fencing would be installed. So I guess the height of that would determine whether it would adequately screen the 2 cabins that are to be constructed and any storage of the activities. But certainly when we had commercial vans parked there in the past, they were very highly visible from a very long distance away. If it's only temporary use for 2 years, then obviously there's no time scale to plant hedgerows and that sort of green landscaping.
Thank you very much. I might ask our officer about that a bit later. Councillor Higgins.
Could you just expand a bit on the usage of that lane? I mean, I assume it's used by walkers and
yes, there's a footpath that runs north, as the officer explained, to West Henley, which actually is in the field margin, but the field margin is ploughed right up to the ditch. The footpath now essentially is on the farm track that runs from the grain drying barns up to.
So that will be sharing the access track with
it would, but I don't think the applicant has proposed any vehicle movements from the site to West Henley. The red boundary on the site runs out through Bradfield Grove onto the A338 and would then access either East Henley to the north or Grove to the south.
And there's a large amount of usage of that track, is there, or is it?
Well, there is, yes, because obviously the sewage works, traffic has a fair amount of traffic with it. The grain drying barns themselves have a fair amount of traffic. And there's also an area not related to this application, but something that has recently been constructed with construction vehicles on it to the east side of the grain drying barns in the parish of Grove. And that also brings in a lot of traffic as well. So I didn't mention that in my comments, but certainly the residents of Bradfield Grove are significantly impacted by any additional traffic movements along that private road. And I suspect Councillor Batson will refer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your time this evening. I'll now turn to our second speaker on this application, which is Mr. Henry Venables again.
Always like, could I ask if you could put the plan back up and then I could help with the questions that you asked?
Yeah. We'll see if we can get this done. So that's
the other one, if possible. Well,
okay, very good. Anyway, well, you know the rules, so 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you again. The previous speaker spoke about Manor Farm, which is about here. I probably can't reach it quite. Where the farm buildings are going to be relocated from here because they're planning permission to be redeveloped for housing, to bring new buildings to here. The public right of way is the previous speaker spoke, is actually in the field, not along this track. So the walkers should be in the field, so there shouldn't be conflict there. There's no reason for traffic to go this way. It's all this way, which is all of this is a private road all the way to the A33 in the ownership of the applicant. The applicant has made this application because somebody approached them looking for a site to set up while they have a contract to replace water meters and put new water meters in. So this is going to happen somewhere in the area. So in reference to the fact that it might be slightly unsightly, it's going to be unsightly somewhere because they're working in the local area to do this. If they couldn't have a site like this for 2 years, they might be forced to have sites just for a month and then constantly move around. So they felt that it was actually better for them to have a good place to locate to, that had good access to the road, would be away from people when they're working. Well, they don't really work on the site. They just arrive in the morning to collect things and then go off for the day and only come back to the site the next morning. There's one man would wait on the yard just in case of problems and for deliveries. Deliveries could come in and then the crews go out and all the numbers were put in the main application. The previous speaker asked about whether it could be screened. I haven't actually asked the applicant that, but it doesn't seem like an unreasonable question to me to have because you saw it on the previous image, it's a safety kind of fence with a green, I don't know, what did you call it? A
Harris fence.
A Harris fence with matting across. I don't see that would be a problem. Because there wouldn't actually be very much on the site anyway, because it's only the 2 cabins and a little storage area. The vans will arrive in the morning, but then they should go. So there might be a couple of cars around, but I don't think it would be such a problem as the people talked about before. Essentially, this is just trying to make efficient use of land. The site is already there. It's used seasonally at the moment, awaiting for the farm be redeveloped to then come to this site. Unfortunately, last harvest was just 40% of an average harvest. Things haven't been able to happen in the way that the farm wished that they would have done to come across to here and take the farm traffic out of the village and bring it all this way. It's only for a 2-year period, and the people will be working, supplying local people with these things anyway. So it strikes me that there's some traffic come past these houses, but really it's not a lot of traffic in comparison to quite a lot of traffic that goes on in relation to the sewage treatment plant over there. So to my mind, it's just a good fit for this particular site.
Thank you very much. Right, I think I saw Councillor Pickles out first, but then Councillor.
Can you just indicate the number of vehicles that the contractor believes is going to be involved in this?
Yes, they gave me some numbers. Skip lorries once weekly for general waste and recycling, twice monthly for spoil and bituminous materials. Cars, approximately 6 cars a day, which is a site supervisor and the yard man. Vans, 12 to 14 daily. The crews take vans home at the end of the day and then report to the site first thing in the morning to unload the previous day's work, because all the bits they've taken away get put into the skips, pick up the new bits, and then move them onto the site when they're working, because they move from house to house to house, as it were.
So this is basically taking away an old water Original, Jake.
Yeah, they put it in the
You
van
think you-
and then move to the next site and next site, and only then deposit them on site next day, and approximately 6 HGVs per month.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, this track is a very busy track from the 338. Yeah, so where would the it's a track, isn't it? And it leads to the sewage works as well. So they all have to go in on that 338 track.
In terms of language, this is a tarmac road.
Yeah.
Coming along to here.
Yeah.
And then this is a public road that goes down to the sewage. Right, it's a really odd public road because it's only in that bit.
Yeah.
This is private, but the sewage farm has the right to go across that bit. From here to here, it's more like a rough stone track. It's not downed tarmac.
So where are there's houses on? They're the new houses that were built, aren't they? In the middle, there's some new houses that have been.
Yes, I think there's,
probably
there's two there, one there.
Yeah,
two on
they're the
this
new
side.
ones, aren't they? Yeah.
Thank you.
But there is a lot of traffic.
And I just thought I'd say.
That's right. Any further questions, clarification? In which to say thank you very much for your time this evening. We have a final speaker on this application, which is Councillor Ron Batstone, ward member. So Councillor Batstone, I think you know the form. I do. But you have 3 minutes when you're ready and you're here. Oh.
Thank you. This site currently has permission to be used for agriculture, and this is definitely not an agricultural project. This is a commercial project which will harm the amenity of the residents. Access is likely to be totally by vehicles because it's not easily accessible for people working there by either walking or cycling. And I do not believe a temporary operation will have a significant effect on the employment area opportunities in the local economy at all. In fact, I don't think it'll have very much effect on the local economy at all. It is a rural location, and it's being planned as a distribution centre, which I believe is inappropriate for this location. This is a rural location which should be seen as a mixture of open country and farmland. A distribution centre with admittedly minimal warehousing, I don't think is appropriate for this site. And there will be frequent vehicle movements. And the real problem that people have in fact, we discussed this in the previous application. It's very difficult to condition the number of vehicles that can be used. And East Hanny Parish Council also have a problem with the A338 is already a very busy road. Increasing the traffic on the A338, I think, is definitely deleterious to residents of Grove and East Hanny. Conditions, if this is approved, and again, we relate back to the previous application. I've asked the question here: could we have conditions on the number of traffic movements? And I think the answer is probably no.
30 seconds left.
And how do we enforce a temporary use for 2 years? I think this is a critical question. There's a lot of emphasis placed on the fact that this is a temporary use. And my feeling is that after 2 years, we're going to get another planning application for a similar use. And I don't know how we do check that, or in fact, how we document the site being returned to its previous state. So,
sorry, which comes to the end of 3 minutes to just sum up very briefly.
So overall, I would recommend opposing this application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buttstone. Has anyone got any questions or clarification? Councillor Hannaford.
Yes, we know that there's a lot of traffic because we go use that on a regular basis. So we've got the sewage work there, and that's quite busy with maintaining that and vans, etc., going there. So are you content when I say that road coming off of the 338 is the main area that they use, or have you visualised or seen them using any other road?
I haven't seen them using any other road, so I think that is probably the main area.
So everybody goes by those cottages and those houses to get to the farm area and also the sewage works, which is quite busy on a daily basis, starting quite early in the morning. I just wanted to clarify for you that it is a busy area.
Councillor Buttstone, I have a question actually, and it's sort of similar to this, which is, and I don't expect a precise answer, but I kind of want to get a sense of the busyness of that lane currently, right? Because I'm kind of trying to get a sense of whether this will radically increase the number of vehicle movements or not. So, I mean, do you have a sort of vague idea of like how much movement of vans is currently going along that lane? Daily. I mean, it's difficult to be precise, but maybe you've spoken to the residents who might be able to.
I think, to be honest, it is quite difficult to measure that. So, and I think it's probably very variable, of course, as well, particularly with this sewage works there. No, I think it's a difficult question for me, I'm afraid.
Understood. That's absolutely fine. It was maybe a mean question to me. Have you got any further questions for Councillor Bates? Please, Councillor Pickles.
Yeah, so I'm just being devil's advocate a bit here, but given the fitting of water meters is quite a discrete activity, and once that job's done, it's done. Are you worried that a secondary business might arrive, which is non-agricultural, to occupy the space left? But I'm just trying to work out what your concern, because 2 years seems like a reasonable temporary period.
It does, and I think I'm worried generally about planning in general, that once planning permission is given for this sort of activity, my feeling is that if the barn, there's any delay in building the barns for which we had the original application, then something very similar is likely to happen in the future, and even making more use of it than at the moment. And I think, again, looking back to the previous application, that what tends to happen with temporary applications is that after 2 years, people come back and, either they come back and ask for the further application or just carry on using the site.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I believe that there was vans there prior before, and they were asked to leave, and they did leave, but they were there for quite some time.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make that comment.
Of course, no, thank you. Councillor Buttstone, I can't see any further questions. I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm now going to return to any questions we have for officers. So we don't have any questions for
So I've got to ask the same question really what we just discussed with Councillor Baxter. So just explain to us the 2-year temporary permission and what would happen at the end of it if A, business wants to continue, or B, another similar non-agricultural business arrives expecting to kind of occupy that space.
Yeah, so it's quite a hard and fast. After the end of that 2 years, the permission expires, and they are required to remove all of the temporary structures, the materials, etc. It has to go back to how it is now, which is essentially hard standing. So if anything was left on the site or they continued using it, we can serve an enforcement notice to require them to stop doing that. And in terms of that would apply regardless of if a new person came in or not. So it does put quite a hard stop to this use. And I think it's also important to say that obviously the red line is quite tight around the site, which has a limiting effect itself, because it wouldn't be, the planning permission wouldn't allow. So for this, you see the hard standing is actually a larger area. It wouldn't, the terms of this planning permission wouldn't allow them to expand that storage over the rest of the site. That would not be permitted by this planning permission.
So it's like, as shown in the diagram, it's a subset of a wider area,
and that has an effect of limiting how intense this use could be, irrespective of conditions. And obviously I put on conditions about when it can be used, and for how long in terms of the 2 years. But I think that's in terms of, I know it was talked about whether we can limit numbers, but I think the site area does that in and of itself, because it's small enough.
So you just know, and ask to the next question then. So how is this different to what happened in the previous application, where when the temporary planning permission expired, they just carried on using the site?
So I think obviously as always, each site on its merits. And I think obviously that has slight differences in that it's linked with restoration and things like that, whereas there's no link here. And we've been given a justification for this use for a temporary period. And when that water meter work is finished, there's that justification isn't there anymore. And I personally, obviously, if they did continue the use, it is for our enforcement team. But given there is an impact, this is a non-agricultural use on agricultural land that does affect neighbours. I don't think it significantly harms them, but it does affect them. So I think there would be public interest in pursuing enforcement action.
Okay.
And also I would question if this was to come back. Obviously you can never say, but I personally, if another application came in without the justification it currently has, I potentially would reach a different recommendation than what I have for this.
So sorry, just so I can clarify that as well. So part of the justification of this is that we're content that really it's only needed for a 2-year period.
Yeah.
Right. So really, like, in terms of the scale of the work's being undertaken, it's only really needed for 2 years. And so if this is a permanent permission, again, it's not a permanent permission. So if you want to tell me a permanent permission, but my suspicion is that you would be less inclined to be recommended approval of that.
So can I just do my, for avoidance of doubt question then, and for the minutes as much as anything else, to partly kind of settle the minds of Councillor Batstone and obviously the parish council and the people that have to live on that road on a day-to-day basis. We are certain we're doing everything possible within this planning application to encapsulate this period and this activity, so that it will end in 2 years' time.
Yeah,
there'll be no kind of inherited or passported rights to occupy that site for another activity as a result of granting this today.
No, it has a hard end point, and there's no way you can get around that. That is a hard stop.
So even Natasha's nodding. So we should make that as well.
Right, we might go into debate in a second, but let's take some more questions.
Thank you.
Councillor James.
I want to ask about the planning permissions for the agricultural buildings. How come they've not lapsed if they're not actually?
So they commenced them. So the hard standing was a material commencement, right. And they've also installed drainage works, which were shut. So there was a condition that required them to submit drainage works, which they did, and they then implemented them. So that permission will last forever now. And I think it's worth saying that obviously I appreciate that the village would wish them to build the buildings, but we as the local planning authority we can't compel them to finish. Once they've started, they've started.
Is there a risk that we give the temporary planning permission, we do actually delay them? Or allow them or encourage them maybe to delay from building those buildings, which is actually the current permitted use for that?
Well, the landowner is the applicant, so I think if they were of the opinion that they were going to build it within that period, they wouldn't apply for this. So, and obviously, like I say, we have no powers to require them to do so. And obviously, you would hope that in that 2 years, they then are in a position where they can progress it, but that's not something we can actually make them do, unfortunately.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Chair. So as part of this, you consulted the county highways. They came back with no objections and said, but you need to go and talk to countryside services team. You consulted them, you said, please update the plan. Did they then just not respond the second time?
Yeah, and more often than not, we don't really get a response from them. Yeah, they tend to like public rights of way being shown on plans, and then we don't.
I was just curious because it obviously please reconsult us, and then there's no second response.
Yeah, we did reconsult them, but nothing.
Thank you.
Anything further?
I'd love a condition on limiting the amount of traffic, but I think the answer is no. I mean, it's a question to officers. Is there a way of putting a condition which requests the developer to advise if there's a change in?
I just think it's tricky to word it in a way that meets the test conditions. Yeah, I think it's tricky, and like I said, I'm content that the size of the application is sufficient, and the short period in which we're allowing it, that the risks are low, in my opinion. And I would struggle to come up with a condition that would meet the test.
And the other condition is the one mentioned by the chair of the parish council about some form of screening. I assume that is something we can condition.
Yeah. So and the lighting as well. So
sorry, I've got to mention it.
Yes. Yeah. So the issue with the lighting is that we have permitted I've recommended that it be allowed till between 7 and 6, and obviously for a lot of the year that will be in darkness. So if you were to wish to seek to control lighting, it would potentially be worded such that lighting shall only be used in the permitted hours. So it means that lights aren't on overnight, which I can understand wouldn't be great. And in terms of, yes, I think we could do a prior to commencement details of temporary fencing or temporary boundary treatment. And then that could also include that too has to be removed at the end of the 2 years, so that there's no
there's no harm caused by this.
Exactly, and that in the meantime it can potentially shield some other storage which will take place.
Councillor James.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask about this. It seems, because to me it feels a little bit odd that it's being sort of approved recommendation in that it's like a commercial. So it's only temporary, but it is a sort of commercial development in the middle of a field in open countryside in view of a village and rights of way. And that's the kind of site where, yes, I would expect something like agricultural buildings, but nothing else really to get permission. And so I'm just a bit surprised. It seems almost like to be kind of just because there's permission for agricultural buildings there now, suddenly it can be used for some other completely unrelated to agriculture commercial use.
Well, so
for a period beforehand, and that seems really odd compared to the other kinds of decisions on things we see coming forward in similar landscapes.
Yeah, so it's being treated as employment use, and the policy CP28 does allow them to be in the open countryside, subject to the criteria that are outlined in the report. And in my opinion, for the reasons given, that it does meet CP28 as a temporary permission. I appreciate it is a somewhat unusual use of the land, but I think with the conditions, that's not necessarily harmful. But I think if this was a permanent proposal, I think it would have a very different recommendation. And I think it's also important to note that we actually refused an application for an HGV yard with nearer those agricultural buildings to the east. For the principle and harm to neighbours. So I think, yes, I would agree. A permanent use, I would agree, this wouldn't be a suitable location. But as I said, I think there's a specific justification, and the temporary nature of it means that it's acceptable. But yeah, I agree. A permanent use would necessarily be appropriate.
Any further questions before we move into debate? In which, because I'm suggesting we move into debate on this application. So to do so, I need a motion. So would someone like to put forward a motion? Councillor Pickford.
I think this is, given the absence of any kind of technical objection, I think we should approve this motion. I think that there are additional conditions I would want to see placed, which you've already discussed around screening, lighting, etc.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, we're thinking about pre-commencement condition on screening detail and a lighting condition, which is that no lighting to be used beyond the hours of operation. I mean, I just want to check, is that reasonable in terms of like, if it finishes at 7, if 6 is the, I don't remember the time, if 7 is the earliest they can be there, do we need to set the lighting from say 6:45 or is it from 7 on the nose?
Essentially, because it could be safe for those arriving at site for there to already be some illumination. Because I think we do that with supermarkets. We allow them so that staff can.
Yeah, that's what I mean. In terms of safety, I think I don't know whether that would be half an hour before or 15 minutes before. I just want to.
I think 15 minutes.
Okay. So I just want to check, is that acceptable? Yeah. So it would be 6:45 to 6:15. For lighting and a screening pre-commencement detail. Right, we need a seconder for that motion though, so would someone like to second? Councillor Madison. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to debate, which is to approve with those extra conditions. Councillor Hanley.
Yeah, and obviously I know this area as well, and I use the 338 and I know I've seen the traffic, and we've got residential people there, so this is going to be constant for these residents there. There's no two ways about it, it is constant. And then some of them are right literally, there's the lane and there's very similar as we've just talked about, narrow, etc. I won't be supporting this, but I'm not going to vote against it because I very rarely abstain. Because it's for the 2-year period. However, I do know the history of the owner, and I know that you will have to be very careful at the end of the 2 years. I just know this is going to happen. So I'll throw it out to you. There is a lot of to and fro from the sewage works, as you can imagine, on maintenance, big lorries, tankers, back and forth on there. I suppose the small vans will go in the morning, collect whatever they've got to do, and then they're going to pick the vans up if they're going to be there. So there's going to be some traffic back and forth, and then they'll come back and do their work, and then they'll have to go back again. So the movement is going to be constant for 2 years for the people that live around that area. But otherwise, it is up out in the middle of the. And I suppose, does this come under for farmers that want to do different works to keep going? Does that come under that? You know, when they used to have farm shops and different things that they could do around to keep the sustainability of the farmer. Does it come under something like that? I'm asking the officer.
Yeah, I think we can. If you don't mind.
So there are permitted development rights for things like that, but it's only when there's a building there.
Yes, exactly.
So if they were to erect a building, they then would have rights to use it for other purposes.
But they would need to get planning in order to erect a building.
Yeah.
Well, there is a fact. So if they carried on and built what they've got permission.
I think it. Yeah, it's very debatable, but anyway, I've told you my stance, so it's set to everybody else.
Any further points of debate on this application? Okay, I can't see any, so I'm just suggest we have a vote on this application. So we have a motion to approve of those 2 amended conditions. We're all clear on what those are. Yeah, good. Okay, all right. So those in favour, those against, the abstentions. That is 6 with 2 abstentions. So thank you very much. So thank you to all of our speakers this evening. We have one further item on the agenda, and that item is for us to. So I'll wait for Councillor Batstone to return.
Okay.
So agenda item 9 is appeals information, and it's to receive the appeals information report from Head of Planning, to consider and note the appeals information report. Natasha, is there anything on this that you'd like to flag?
Nothing, Chair, actually. All of the appeals that are listed are actually, and where we've had them lodged and decisions issued, they were all decisions made under delegated authorities. So none of them are actually committee decisions.
Oh, right.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
And can I just check the two that were, the two appeals that were allowed, the costs weren't going to put on those, were
No, they won't.
Can I just clarify, some of these are for South Oxfordshire.
Yes, they are. And the next time we run the report, we will make sure that it's daily bail.
Thank you.
That's a good idea.
Yes, yes, no, this is something as we
Yes.
and maybe we'll note that in the minutes as
Yeah.
well. So anyway, very good. Right, anything further, or can we say so noted? So noted. Right. Okay. And on that basis, we've so noted. So that just leaves me to thank all of our speakers, to thank all of our officers, and indeed to thank you, committee, for some lively debates. And with that, I close the meeting and